Today we are going to be learning about rounding decimals. It's lesson 2.8, and the colors that you're going to need is like an aqua color, this blue-green, and scarlet. Looks like a dark orange. Go ahead and find those two colors and then pause the video and get steps, write this down and get steps 1 and 2 written down before we move on. Okay? Hopefully you've already set up your journal now. Let's go ahead and read what it says. When rounding, we either leave the digit the same or round it to the next digit up. We must know our place values in order to do this. Follow these 5 steps, and you would have only written 2 so far. Number 1, underline the place value they have asked for. For example, if they say, let's put a period on the end of that. If they say round to the nearest tenths place, then we're going to underline the tenths place. If they say round to the nearest whole number, then we're going to round to the ones place. Step 2, after you've underlined the place value, step 2, look over to the digit on the right of the underline. So you'll have a number that's underlined, and you have to look over to the right. The number that's over here on the right is going to tell you what to do. So here is step number 3. Pause the video and get that written. Ask yourself, 5 or more? Then raise the score. 4 or less? Then let it rest. So that number that you're looking over to on the side, if it is a 5 or more, so it could be a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9. If it's 5 or more, you're going to raise the score. You're going to look back at the underline and you're going to raise it up to the next whole number, to the next highest digit. But if that number that you looked at to the right is a 4 or less, like 4, 3, 2, 1, or even 0, then you're going to let it rest. So you're going to go back to the underline and you're going to let it rest and leave it alone. Okay? So that is what you do on step number 3. You have to ask yourself this question. On step number 4, we're going to explain a little more about what you do if it's 5 or more and what you do if it's 4 or less. Okay? So this is step number 4. Step number 4. I'm going to write it together. Step number 4. 2 things can happen here, right? It could be 5 or more, or it could be 4 or less. So, if you looked to the right, notice how I'm going to only go halfway here. If you looked to the right and that number, you can just put the number sign, was here we go, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, comma, go back to the underline place value and raise it to the next highest number. Or what you would do in this situation is add 1 more. So some people have heard the phrase 5 or more, add 1 more. Okay, so that's very similar to what we did there. But when you go and underline the word underlined, we're going to go back to the underline place value and raise it to the next highest number. And that means we're going to add 1 more to it. So I know this is a lot of writing, but we're going to be practicing a bunch and it'll make sense in a minute. But that is one thing that you do if it's 5 or more. Okay, so if it's 5 or more, that's what you do. If it's 4 or less, we're going to be writing what to do on this part. So if it's 5 or more, you do this. If it's 4 or less, you're going to do this. So more writing. If you look to the right And that number was a, so it has to be a 4 or less. So it could be a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1, or a 0. Go back to the underline place value. And let it rest. And let it rest, which just means leave it alone. Okay? Leave it the same. Maybe that would be better to say here. Leave it the same. Okay. So if it's a 5 or more, I'm going to raise the underline number to the next highest digit. If it's a 4 or less, though, I just leave the underline number alone. Okay? There's going to be something really important that happens here. Excuse me. We're gonna write that right here. I want to get in step number 5. Let's just see if we can get it written right here then. Let's put a big star off to the side, even past the red mark. And color it in pencil. Okay. All numbers in front of the underline I'm going to capitalize front. All numbers in front of the underline number, we'll just put it like this, stay the same. It's really important, okay? All numbers in front of the underline stay the same. All numbers behind the underline, all numbers behind, I guess I'll use pencil first, the underline disappear. Okay, let's color in the star to end that statement. So, let's review that. Wow, this star is looking scarier and scarier. That is a star. I hope your star looks a little bit better than mine. All numbers in front of the underline, so that's over here on the left, stay the same. All numbers behind the underline, that's to the right, will disappear. Okay, and here's step number 5. We're going to sneak it in here at the very bottom. Step number 5, make sure your answer, make sure, we'll say final answer. Make sure your final answer ends in the place value they asked for. Ends in the place value they asked for. That's really, really important. Make sure your final answer ends in the place value they asked for. All right, we have taken a whole page of notes. We've gone over the 5 steps, the things that you need to do. And now let's practice on the back side. There's lots of practice we can do. Before we move on, though, I want to take my aqua blue color, and I'm just going to kind of box these things, a big loop, because I want you to be aware that once you look to the digit to the right, you have to really turn on your brain and do some thinking with what might have to happen. Okay, so we'll just follow these steps really quickly. Don't forget the saying, 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. Okay, turn the page. Let's do some practice problems. Will you please write this phrase at the top? Round to the nearest tenth. I'm going to write that whole phrase on the top line. Round to the nearest tenth. Those are the instructions. And let's practice one. Okay, here's my first number. 21.62. Round to the nearest tenth. Let's take our orange and just underline the directions. So here I go with my steps. Remember, step number 1, underline the place value they have asked for. Okay, they've asked for the tenths. So I underline the place value that they have asked for. Step number 2, look over to the digit on the right of the underline. So maybe we should use our blue here. So I underline it. I look over, draw the arrow please. I look over at the digit to the right, and it's a 2. Don't forget it. It's a 2. Ask yourself, 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. It was a 2. So we're going to be following these steps. If you look to the right, and that number was a 4, 3, 2, there it is, 1 or 0, go back to the underline place value and leave it the same. Let it rest. So I'm going to go back to the 6 and go, you are just going to be staying the exact same. So I just write it right underneath it. Okay, that one stays the exact same. Step number 5. Well, let's look at the star first. All the numbers in front of the underline stay the same, and all the numbers behind it disappear. So all the numbers in front of the 6 stay the same. So that means the decimal stays and the 21. All the numbers that were behind the underline disappear. So my final answer is 21.6. And I check for step number 5. Make sure your final answer ends in the place value they asked for. Did they ask for tenths? Yes. And I ended in tenths, so I did that correctly. So this is my final answer, 21.6. Let's try another one of those. Let's come over here to the side. Let's do 34.85. Round to the nearest tenth. Which digit is in the tenths place? The 8. I look to the right. 5 or more, raise the score. Ah, it is a 5. So I go back to this number and I raise it. I add 1 more. How do you raise an 8? You raise it to 9. It's the next highest number. Everything in front has to stay the same. Everything behind it disappeared. So my final answer is 34.9. Did I end in the tenths like they asked for? Yes. I am doing so good at this. It is awesome. All right. What I want to show you before we practice another one is how you can visualize this or why it makes sense. Okay. So I'm going to draw a number line. Okay. And on my number line, I'm going to use it in tenths. So if I'm trying to draw 21.6 on a number line, I'm going to go like this. So 21.6 would be on this side, because I'm just looking at the tenths, 21.6. Who would be the next tenth up here? If I added 1 whole tenth, it would be 21.7. So I have to break up the space between 21.6 and 21.7. Are there numbers that are in between 21.6 and 21.7? The answer is yes. There are numbers that are between that, and it's so crazy to understand that. But let me show you a really cool little trick. Remember, you can always add zeros to the end of decimal numbers to help you out with anything you need. And this might be a situation that we need that for. So let me show you. Instead of 21.6, let's call that 21.60. And instead of 21.7, let's call that 21.70. Those are the same numbers. I've just added another 0 for place value. Now I can tell you there are definitely numbers in between 0.60 and 0.70. That's a lot easier. In fact, I know who would be right in the middle. It would be 21 point, what's in between 60 and 70? 0.65. You still have to have the 21 there. So it would be 21.65. Okay, so now I want you to go and graph the original number and prove to me that 21.62 really is closer to this side than that side. Where would 21.62 be? Here's 21.60. Here's 21.65. So it's got to be in between here. There's 60, maybe 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 64, 63, 62. Maybe it's like right there. Right? This might be my 21.62. So that is just proof to me that 21.62 truly is closer to 21.6. So I'm just going to show you that in the color. See how close that was to 21.6 and how far away it is from 21.7? That is why 21.62 rounded to the nearest tenth, the closest number to it, is 21.6. I just added the zeros to help the number line make sense. So let's try it again over here. This time it's 34.85. And they're asking for tenths. So I set up my number line in tenths again. So I do what they have, 34.8 on this side. And what would be the next number up? 34.9. The next tenth up, 34.9. I'm going to add zeros here so I can help my number line make sense. 34.80 and 34.90. What is right in the middle of 80 cents and 90 cents? It's 0.85, but you still have to have the 34 in front. So that's who's in the middle, 34.85. So where does 34.85 belong on the number line? Ah, it's right here. It is right there in the middle. And remember, when we're right in the middle or we're at halfway, we're always going to round up. So that is why you round 34.85 to the nearest tenth, and the answer would be 34.9. It's pretty awesome. I love rounding to the nearest tenths. It's pretty great. In the next video, we're going to show some more sample problems, so you'll want to come back to check out how to do this.